Well, Lana and Jason, thank you so much for being on the Valiant Living podcast. Really honored to be able to host you guys today and hear some of your story and the work you do. I'm curious though, how did you guys first begin working together, and how did you guys team up?
Yeah, well, Lana was doing a presentation. What was the presentation called? Do you
Couples
remember?
in Recovery.
Okay.
Build how to help couples in recovery build a secure bond.
Oh, nice.
Ooh, great title.
Yeah, I
Thank
know. I
you.
totally. So I was there,
Thank
and
you.
it was a great presentation.
Thanks.
And I was like a fan afterwards, and I was like, hey, we're doing some of the same sort of things. Let's team up.
Yeah.
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 So what does that look like for you guys in your practice? So do you guys do private now, couples? Like, I'm just curious how that plays out.
So before COVID, we did some couples in recovery workshops. I had a workshop that I had launched called Have Each Other's Backs Again for couples in recovery. And it was something that, I created from scratch and still, drew from evidence-based practices and couples therapy and also addiction. And so Jason and I, when we could all meet in person, that was, pre-COVID, we were running some of those workshops. And then, and we both still had our own private practices.
Okay.
And then since COVID, I've only run a couple of workshops. But right now we share an office suite.
Okay.
And so we, although we're not running the workshops yet, I would love to offer those again.
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really powerful
Yeah.
and healing. And but now I mean, the way I describe kind of how we work together is we both have our own practices, but we consult in between clients as much as possible, or just sometimes, just to connect personally.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I would imagine it helps you not to feel like you're having to do this alone. Like, I watched the team of therapists here at Valiant, and especially during staffing, when they'll go through their client list and just kind of talk and help each other. I mean, it's like, I can imagine having a teammate just to bounce like, hey, this is going on. Can you help me understand what's really happening? Those type of things I bet are pretty valuable.
Yeah,
what you're
for sure.
doing.
Yeah, therapists need support too.
Sure. So I'm curious how you guys, you have this passion for couples, specifically in recovery, correct? Which a big reason why we wanted to have you on is because at Valiant, although we're a men's program, it's very much about the family system. Like, I don't want to speak for the therapist, but a lot of the success rate for the clients that we have, it really depends on how well that family system is able to come around that person who's in recovery, but also how much they're willing to do their own work, how much they're willing to kind of look at what parts they have to play in all this. And so having you guys here to kind of talk about this specifically is really big for us. I know in my story, I shared a little bit before we started recording that my wife was a big part of our healing journey. And without her being willing to do her own work, which she didn't have to do, I don't know that we would be where we are today, or at least as far down the road. And so, first of all, let me just start with a thank you. Thank you for the work that you do for couples like me who are just trying to rebuild and find freedom and peace. And I'm sure there's long days, long nights in what you do, but thank you for the work that you do. What
Such
drove?
a pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. What drove this passion for you guys? Why did you choose this life?
Yes. Do you want to go first?
You're
Yeah,
like,
I'll
do
go.
we have time for this?
Yeah.
Oh, no, this is a fun
I'll try to do
question.
like the abbreviated
Yeah.
answer.
Cool.
So I've been divorced. My wife and I, we've been through couples therapy, some good, some not so good. By the time we got to someone good, I was already emotionally checked out. But it made me think, I was a therapist at the time, it made me think, okay, I know what's good, and I want to offer couples therapy moving forward. We got divorced. During that time, I was a drug and alcohol counselor, but my journey with substances, so about 21, I'm trying to keep this quick.
No, it's fine.
I had a rock bottom, alcohol, cocaine, everything. I was doing a lot of psychedelics at the time, so I got into meditation, Eastern religion. So I went to the Denver Zen Center, or Zen Center of Denver. And I was like the youngest person there. And I started sitting, I started working with my stuff. This was my journey. I didn't know about NA, I didn't know about AA. And I started to get some freedom, some comfort. However, I thought I cured myself.
Right.
And I love the AA saying, once you're a pickle, you can't go back to being a cucumber. And, even at the Zen Center, gosh, I would go on a retreat. I would get drunk afterwards. One time I threw up on a space heater at the Zen Center. Right?
Wow.
And I remember people.
Is this all while being were you a therapist already at this point? Or
I was a drug and alcohol case manager.
Gotcha.
So because I was like, I'm going to help other people. I'm going to help kids. We were a juvenile drug and alcohol program as a case manager. But I thought I was good, right?
Well, that's why I wanted to ask, because I relate to that. A lot of times you can be in something, doing a lot of good work, but still not really looking internally like you need to. So I think that's a powerful part of your story. I appreciate you sharing that part.
Yeah, and probably just reflecting, I remember this one member was like, Jason, do you have a drinking problem? I was like, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor, right? I don't have a drinking problem.
You ask me
and then real quick, I'll wrap this up in terms of my recovery. I went to AA on my own, but the same thing. I was like, I'm not as bad as these people, right? And then finally, we say in AA, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I went back in and I did the steps and everything, and I've been sober since. And so the whole time, this kind of incorporating couples work and recovery, and then synced up with Lana during the time, and she integrates it really well. So that's kind of how I, got to working with couples and having the recovery bent on it.
It makes sense. So many people I talk to that are in this space have some sort of personal connection with it themselves, which I think is really helpful to be able to relate and identify with people who are going through it. And I almost wonder if it's a bit of a rite of passage in the recovery journey to have to say that statement, I'm not like everyone else, or I don't have a problem. Like, is it? I mean, do you hear that? Is it almost everybody?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It seems like that's like, you have to say, it's almost like when you hear someone say that, all right, good. All right. You're on the journey. Hopefully you can get past that part, but that's a big part of it is that denial. I mean, when you said that, I was like, yes, I remember being that guy.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy when I look back on it that I was ever at that place. But
so I think that fits in with my story.
Yeah, perfect.
So I'll just, kind of segue here with, I think where mine really starts is I was in my Master of Social Work program, clinical social work, and I was taking a family therapy class. We had to choose like a specialty area to focus on and research. And so I ended up in the group on children of alcoholics. And we were reading this book, It Will Never Happen to Me, speaking of denial.
Right.
And so I'm reading the book and thinking this entire book, this describes my family to a T. But how strange, like we don't have an alcoholic in our family. Even though my parents were bar and restaurant owners.
Right.
They also had real estate, but I didn't put it together because my dad was so extremely brilliant and successful, and with my mom's help. She was, the organizer and bookkeeper, and she did so many things behind the scenes for their businesses. But I just remember thinking, this is really bizarre. Like, this is my family, but no alcoholic here. Right. And I would see my dad drink, but it didn't dawn on me that, like, drinking at night, every night, that was a problem. Because I think in our culture, it's so normal. Like, you need to unwind. You're an adult. You have the right to have a couple of drinks. No big deal. I didn't know the level of drinking he was doing at night, of course. And then there was a crisis. He had a mental health crisis while I was in maybe my second year of the program, where that's when it kind of started coming out. Like, my mom started kind of admitting, like, Dad has something more going on with mental health. There's maybe a drinking issue. We don't know. So that led to, not yet my dad getting real help for the drinking yet, but eventually he did have a really profound health crisis where it was a near-death experience, and that led him in the hospital. And that's when I remember he told me that even though the doctors didn't recommend it, he thought just stopping drinking was a good idea. And I'm like, that's awesome, Dad.
Right,
Whatever. Wow. Wonderful. That's a great idea. And then, started going to AA. And, to his credit, he was open. He was much more open and willing. I think that, near-death experience can help.
Yeah.
And he started going to meetings. And even though I would say, we only had about four healthy-ish years with him before he passed away, we still saw some change in him,
Sure.
that was wonderful.
Sure.
And then in terms of my mom's change, and I'll talk about mine too here, because
this is great.
I'm realizing I'm neglecting a very important person here. So, but my mom's journey, did some Al-Anon, also my encouragement, and I think at that point there was still, in terms of her role as a caretaker, it kind of shifted from, I think, covering up and just, always trying to smooth everything out with my dad's drinking and some other out of control behaviors he had, to then after his health crisis, then she really had to go into full caretaker mode,
Sure.
which was a bummer.
Sure.
I've seen enormous healing and transformation in my mom since my father's passing. But there was a lot of healing that I did before he passed away. So I'll just say one last piece is when the near-death experience happened, that's right around the time I was working also as an substance abuse counselor loved doing family night. That was always my favorite night, of course. And really where I started getting help for myself I remember I had two coworkers who were in recovery, more AA guys. And one day I decided I'm going to just clean out the office and make things really nice and organized for them. Well, they came into work and they didn't know where anything was. Oh, no. And one of them kind of sat down in a gentle but firm way, just said I think you might want to consider Al-Anon, just kind of my,
wow.
What I didn't see is some of my controlling tendencies. I thought I was being helpful, right? Like a lot of Al-Anon folks,
right.
we're I'm just gonna,
Yep.
make things easier to find. Well, they couldn't find anything, so they were pissed, of course. But it was good that I was in Al-Anon at the time when my father had his really big health crisis, and I also was given the opportunity to tell my story as well. At an AA Al-Anon, it was a potluck, a Friday night.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well, both of your stories is kind of bringing up something for me that I'd love to just dive into when it comes to couples in recovery specifically, and that's where we're going to kind of focus on a lot of our time today. And I'm going to say this the best I can, and then you course correct me, right, if I misspeak. But what I've noticed in my own story and in people close to me is that you've got these two people that are trying to navigate addiction, whether they know it or not, and they've tried to navigate it for a long time. Sometimes, for me, it was 20 years of addiction before I even had any labels or terms or knew what it was. So here's my wife living with an addict that doesn't know he's an addict and having to develop or form her own survival skills on how to just survive the world with an addict who can never get content and never can the void. So in her, and she would say this if she was on the podcast, there were ways of being that just became her second nature for her. And we see this a lot with our couples in recovery where it's you may have, and I'm just going to pick on the men because we're a men's program. I'm sure it works both ways, but we have men that come here that have a very external issue, something has happened in their life, like you said, a crisis or something that they unmanageable. They've got to go to help, right? It's somewhat public. Got to go get help. But oftentimes, what's left behind is a spouse, significant other, who has developed their own addictions, their own codependency, their own whatever, to just navigate living with this addict. I'm sorry, this is such a long-winded question. I'm just trying to give some context.
This is great.
But what I'm curious about is, well, first of all, because there's so much wounding there, a lot of times with a traumatic experience, whatever, that it can be very difficult for that, whether it's the betrayed spouse or to want to take a look at what has happened and formed in me over the course of this relationship. Because a lot of times there's just so much hurt, or there's so much like, well, he's got the problem, he's got the issue. Right. And what I've heard our leader here, Michael Dedeen, talk about, and this is not from a place of shame or judgment, but oftentimes the spouse or the partner has more work to do than even the guy in recovery. The guy in recovery that's here in treatment, it may have been more loud and more external, but there could be some deeper issues left behind. And so this is the work you guys are in every day, right? What do you say to the person that's listening right now or that's watching who is dealing with the trauma, the pain, you talked about Al-Anon. My wife did that, the S-Anon stuff. For the person who's hurting right now, it's like, man, I've got a father, a husband, a spouse, or whatever, it's in recovery. How do you encourage them to take that first step? Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, I will say the last thing, I'll shut up and let you guys talk because you're the experts, but I had no expectation for my wife to do it was like, hey, this is on me. She courageously chose to, and it's what I think saved our marriage. But a lot of people, it's a big hurdle to get over, to even want to take a look at what needs to heal in me. So there's a question in there somewhere. I just would love for you guys to riff on that because I think it's important, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you guys, I'm sure when people come to you, they're already at that place where they're looking for help. But how do you help that person say, hey, yes, he or she has a problem, but let's look at what's going on here too?
For sure. Well, I know. Okay.
Sorry, I just go right into the deep end here and throw a softball.
It's great.
No, that's great.
This is like $1 million question. It's.
Sorry, it took me so long to get to it, but I was trying to.
It's so important. I think the first thing is meeting both people where they're at. So, oftentimes one partner is in a treatment program, and I'm meeting first with their spouse, who will call because she's trying to set up couples therapy or family therapy when the whole family system needs to heal. And so I've met with that spouse and maybe their adult children, for example, or younger children. So I think first meeting them where they're at and their pain and validating that and really, empathizing and honoring that and hearing their story. And so it's a creative or it's kind of an expressive art, but it's also a deep trauma technique I use, which is sand tray. And so they'll make a picture in the sand with all these different objects. And it's like a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I'll just say, show me what life looked like with your loved one during his addiction. And it really can, I think, bring up a lot of emotion and also help people express things that are maybe they might feel shame or embarrassment, or it might be too hard for them to share. And for so long, they felt like they needed to protect their partner or their father or whoever it was with the addiction. So they've just learned how to censor their words. But sand tray, they can just, somehow it removes these kind of defense mechanisms. It just makes it easier for them to show.
Right. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, I at times I might share parts of my story, to help them feel like they're not alone, and that I really, I think the message I tend to give to spouses and their children or family is you deserve support. You deserve
Yeah,
healing.
that's right.
You deserve to know you're not alone, because this can feel so isolating, everything you've been through. And there are other people who are, like you were mentioning to us earlier, Drew, there are some, women or men or, farther along in their healing journey, and they would love to be a support to you.
That's right.
And they were so helpful to me. And so that's partly how I get them in the door. Eventually I will want to help them see that. I'll just share this. This is a quote by Michael Barnett. He's one of the experts in couple therapy, the model that I practice, EFT, and addiction. Eventually, I need to help the couple see. The quote goes, couples unintentionally co-create a toxic pattern that maintains relational distress and erodes trust and closeness. Partners are both unwitting victims and authors of their cycle.
Wow. Wow. That's really good. I got chills when you said that, because it connects so deeply with me. Sometimes I wonder how couples, without a bit of a reset, when they've established the pattern for so long, like when I look back on my story, I was so glad that I had the gift, and it didn't feel like a gift at the time, but the gift of going to treatment, because if nothing else, we needed space, almost like a therapeutic separation, to work on ourselves, so that when we came back together, and we're still breaking pattern, we still see them come up all the time, because we had 20 years of establishing a way of being together. And when you read that quote, it just reminded me of like, hey, that's part of the journey, is taking a look. And what I love about your response, Lana, is that if there's so much compassion in that. Like, and I want to hear, Jason, what you would say to this, but it didn't feel like, it's not a shame, like, hey, you need to look at what your role to play in that. It's not that at all. I love how you said, hey, you deserve to heal. You deserve to, because I think if people can get to that place, then they're more willing to say, okay, you're right. This isn't about what I've done wrong for whatever. This is more about how do we break these patterns that are destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, piggybacking on the cycles, I think in the beginning, if we want to say, I would say the sober partner, because that doesn't really define it. But kind of what you were saying, it's simple validation, right? I mean, this is a little bit of, craziness, if you want to use that word.
Mm-hmm.
But then to identify the cycles and, of course, you two end up here. This is your pattern. We call it the understanding phase, right? When there's been some sobriety, maybe the smoke has settled a little bit, and common cycles that I see can sometimes be the sober partner may show up as like a probation officer, right? Mm-hmm. The using partner is like the probationee, angry teenager, whatever that is, and his probation officer meets probationee, right? And this negative pattern, right? And if we want to have compassion, we can maybe, was alcohol in your family, right? Mm. How did your parent respond to your dad using, if we want to do it that way, right? Mm-hmm. But so we understand a little bit of compassion, right? Or, maybe you are controlling. It's not the best way to put it, but right, you're in the probation. Let's look at that. Where does that come from? And I think therapists, we are not trying to be, you're doing that, you're wrong, what's wrong with you, right? It's like, of course this happens. Yeah. Now the work is, let's transform that dance, right? Whatever that pattern is. And that's one of the benefits of working with a couples therapist, is that we have done this a lot. We know dynamics, and we can identify the negative cycle. Mm-hmm. There's different languages. EFT has their own language. I'm trained in RLT, throwing acronyms out to everyone.
And we're both trained in PACT.
Right? And so there's different paths to identify the cycle, but it's really important for the couple to know this is our pattern, and then have a game plan out of it. And then the idea is, what can we do collaboratively? That's really the big key.
Yeah.
So make it so we spend less time there.
I love that. It's funny. You said the word, and I was literally, my follow-up question to that is, because you guys talk about the addiction dance, and he said the word dance. Can you unpack that a little bit more? What does that look like? Because I think that's really important to understand, because I think people will be able to see themselves in this a little bit. But that's some terminology that you guys use in your work, recovery work, addiction dance.
Yeah.
What is that?
Okay. I'll start, and then if you want to add something.
Yeah.
So,
And you guys are even allowed to disagree on the podcast if you want. That'd be great, right?
Lana, you are full of it. I can't believe. Sorry.
She was way off on that one. Let me course correct that answer. Yeah.
okay.
Don't listen to my colleague.
Could you imagine?
So addiction dance. So, of course, it can look, different. I think for every couple, but I think with all of my couples, we look at their pattern, and every couple, the best of couples, we all have some kind of negative patterns that we just, I think might be based on when we don't feel safe, when we don't feel seen, when we're in distress. And if you, for anyone who grew up in a family where it wasn't encouraged, or it just wasn't, the pattern of when you're in distress, you can turn to a loved one for comfort, for support.
Yes.
That it was safe to show, it was normal, it was healthy to show emotion. If you didn't have that, then when I look at a pattern, I think it's so normal that we're going to turn to other things. And when we do turn to other things, and one of those other things, it's not always I'm turning to a substance or porn or food or whatever you're turning to. It could, in some cases, be, for some partners, if they're really in a lot of internal distress, this might be more of the partner. Well, I don't love the term codependent either, but if we just say that partner, they might be a little bit more obsessive or focusing on their partner. Maybe just instead of really looking inside and touching their pain, because that's too much. So that just might be so foreign to them. They might not even realize what their pain is and
They're almost suppressing how they're feeling because they're just used to managing this other person.
Right. Which can also, it can, help alleviate their stress or their pain.
Yeah.
So I think when I think of the dance, just as I was saying with that, the definition by Michael Barnett, the co-creating this toxic pattern, it causes this distress, it erodes trust and closeness. I think it's just any time partners aren't able to really, go to each other and get some comfort, get some support, or let your loved one know, I'd really love some connection right now, or I'm struggling with something. Even if your partner isn't available right at that moment, it's still even just a quick, like a hug, or just, touching your partner, or, even I think if you're not with them at all, just to be able to calm, even if you can just picture your partner or whoever is your source of support. It might be your sponsor if you're not yet in a relationship that really feels safe to turn to a loved one. But overall, I guess one quick pattern is that I see a lot is on the outside. We'll say with a lot of my couples, on the outside, when you get caught in this pattern, and it's really the pattern that's the enemy. It's not either of you. It's, that both of you get caught in it. When, one partner, you're in distress, you might tend to shut down. You might, you might just turn to like kind of being on the internet a lot, or turn to alcohol, or it could be healthy things like exercise, whatever it is. The other partner, then they see my loved one, where's my partner that I love? What's going on? Or they might be in panic and terror, if they're like, oh my gosh, this is happening again. And then they might get angry and, critical, or they might turn away as well. Yeah. They might turn to, as much as I want people to have support, if you're always turning to, I'll just say, we're kind of describing, I'm thinking about just a heterosexual couple. Male partner turns away to some kind of addictive process behavior, female partner turns to all of her girlfriends to complain about the male partner. But neither, when do you come back together? When do you say, hey, that I was really worried about you. I was scared, or what happened, just then. So they need to repair. And if they don't, then you're going to really, what the cycle creates is just more suffering and alone.
Yes.
And
isolation.
Right.
Well, I love how you said, I wrote this down because I think it's huge. You said the pattern is the enemy, which I think that alone is a very profound thought, because it takes the bullseye off of each other, right?
Yeah.
When we're able to say, hey, you're not the enemy in this, but the pattern itself, the system that we've created is our enemy. And now we can confront with our fronts to this problem. It takes the emphasis off, I've got to fight my partner here on what's going on, but we've co-created, like the quote said, this pattern that has actually become our enemy. So now let's co-create a new way of being, and that's why we need you guys. We need people like yourselves that are helping us build these new neural pathways and patterns and systems so that we can show up different. Because I can tell you, even on the other side of getting sober, and you guys know this, it doesn't naturally form. Those old patterns are right there.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and real quick on that, like, once you're, deep family, you've been in the relationship for, 10, 20 years, right? We revert to our old templates we learned growing up, right? And if we're not intentional about that, then we go right back into those patterns.
Well, what you guys are saying too, that I think is really important is sometimes I wonder if even words like addiction, and you guys have been really hesitant to say words like codependency. Sometimes these labels don't serve us all that well, because we go to a place in our mind of, oh, well, I'm not an addict. That's not me. Or I didn't, like, one thing I really struggled with personally was I have a great family. Like, I was just with my parents last week. They're amazing humans that gave us so much love and care. And also there were some things that we didn't get that as adults we needed to go. But I had to really work through, I don't want to look at that, because I felt defensive of my parents. Like, whatever, in my story, they stayed together and they loved us and provided they gave us all the things. It took me a long time to get past, like, oh, there's some things I need to look at here, and not feel guilty, like that I was going to somehow shame these wonderful humans that raised us. But once I was able to get past that, I was like, oh, okay. And then to be able to pass that down to my kids, to even have that conversation with my kids who are adults now, like, hey, I hope you noticed that your mom and I did the very best we could with you, but also go to therapy. Like, go get whatever we didn't give you. Could you go, like, we give you full permission to go and find those things that we may have not been able to give you. But it's sneaky,
That's
right?
amazing, Drew.
Yeah,
Well,
Very few parents say that.
Well,
really, really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like it's hard for me to take credit, because that's part of what I've learned from people like yourself and Valiant. Like, it's not, I would never have come on that on my own, but it almost relieves me of the, hey, I didn't give you everything you needed. And
Because
I did
I'm
my
human.
best. I'm human.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I didn't
Nobody
want
can.
to,
Right. There's
it's-
no parent who can give their child everything they need.
Right. But all this conversation can be so sneaky, because I'm not an addict. My parents weren't alcoholics, or we didn't label it that. And so learning how to kind of push past the labels and whatever, and just say, okay, we all have these unhealthy escapes that we tend to go to if we're not careful.
Right.
Let's take a look at that. I'm curious though, what the misconceptions around, couples in recovery. That's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that first step of just being able to admit, like, hey, there's something we need to look at here. There's something we need to confront. Are there any common misconceptions that you guys see come up quite a bit in this world, in this, around these conversations?
Well, real quick, based on what you were saying, I'm not trying to just echo it, but it's, I don't have, it's not that bad.
Right. Right.
My parents are good, right? This is a real quick sidetrack, if you
this
don't
is great.
mind.
Please.
The idea of, we can love our parents and wish they would have shown up differently, right? That is a little different way of looking at it. But for me, it's like, oh yeah, my parents were perfect, right? But kind of reflecting on it, learning on it, it's like, hey, wait a second. There's room for that. But I think learning, hey, for me, I could have got a little more guidance, nurture, limits, right? I can see how my parents didn't show up that way. And so there's less of shame on me, right? I still have personal responsibility, but it's not like, oh my gosh, I am so inadequate. I stink. This is all on me. My parents were perfect, right? I think there's room to take a little bit of that shame off. Be like, oh,
I love that.
Okay.
I love that. It helps you breathe a little deeper and say,
for sure. And I still love them. I'm not blaming them, right? They're trying their best. I wish they would have shown up differently at times.
I think that's huge. That's been huge for me and some of my friends that have been in this space. And I'm really glad that you went there, because I think that's a hurdle for a lot of people. And maybe even one of the misconceptions that we're talking about. Misconception is,
right.
Hey, everything, this is my fault because I was given everything. And one of the lines that came back to me when you were talking that someone told me here at Valiant was, it may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. And you said that in what you were just talking about, where it's like, okay, yeah, there is a reason why I'm the way I am. I had to survive. There's a reason why I was leaning into that ego part of me that was helping me figure out how to navigate the world, and it's not all your fault. And man, with the work that you do and the work that people like here at Valiant do, one of the first steps is just getting that shame shield to
for sure.
lower.
Yeah.
Like, right. I'm a terrible person and how could I have let this happen? It's like, no, wait a minute. How could you have not?
Yeah.
Based on, when everyone makes sense in light of their story, right? Based on your story. Oh.
Well, and you would say the shame shield for both partners.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Mm-hmm. Right. Because I know that a lot of the partners feel, how could I have let this happen, or how could I have participated?
I can't believe I stayed, right? All that.
Definitely.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the shame around even staying sometimes and rebuilding.
For sure. And yet, I was just thinking about, you're asking about some of the misconceptions.
Yeah.
So one, I was thinking about just in general with relationships, that it's as if, there should never be any hurts, like that parents should be perfect or partners should be perfect. That, and yet what we know about what actually creates the strongest bond in relationships, all relationships, it's really when this could be in a friendship. It's like if there is some kind of rupture, I'm not saying go out and make that happen, but like if
don't hear us say go manufacture a rupture. But
if it does happen, or more often it's just like a misattunement, or we're just not in sync, or you feel hurt by your partner or your friend or someone not showing up for you in a certain way, or saying something that just that felt really hurtful or insensitive, but like. That's normal. It's just we're not taught that that's normal, and that it's okay to have those moments where they don't go perfectly. There are hurts. It's all about the repair. It's about having the courage to say, hey, however you want to say it to your partner. Sometimes it can be as just if it is not a huge rupture, if it's just like you weren't there for me, or you might not have known or something. But I was upset about that, and I think it shows a real sign of strength in your relationship, that you can have that honesty in a really sensitive way. It's always, I think, ideally giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. You might not have known that, but I just want to let you know, when that happened, that did upset me or hurt me, or I'd really love in the future if you could, something like that. So that's one misconception, that there should never be these moments, and yet the research, this is Ed Tronick, with mothers and babies, he saw like 70% of the time, I think he said, moms weren't attuned to their baby. They weren't in sync.
Interesting.
But then they did get in sync. Then they were paired, and they got back in this beautiful synchrony. And, they call that the love song. It's like baby or partner, saying, hey, I'm here, I want to be close to you, like those bids for connection.
So it's not a matter of keeping this constant state of connection at all times.
Right.
It's how often you can get back, you can repair and get back in sync.
Right.
I love that. And you mentioned before we started recording, and you're just touching on it. I wonder if you would go just a little bit deeper into, I know a lot of people feel the shame around, man, especially with children. I just have royally screwed up, and I've just knocked myself off of this pedestal of respect that my children held me on. And will they ever respect me again? Will they ever love me again? And so we go through all these shame narratives in our mind. But before we started recording, you started touching on it there too. There's a gift in that for our children, isn't there? Like showing up as a broken human. And because I really wrestled with this, and I had a therapist tell me early on, it's like, you, in some ways, did your kids a favor because you showed them because they did have you on this pedestal.
For sure.
But now they realize that you're a human, and brokenness is part of, like, could you just talk about that? Because I'm sure there's people listening or watching right now who are wrestling with, in their family system, and it could be with a spouse, with a child, or even with their parents. Because I know for me, my parents were very proud of me.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I just really messed that up. And I didn't. Thought I did, but I didn't.
Right. Yeah.
But speak to that a little bit.
Well, it's a pretty profound question. So, I think part of it is giving, I think you're modeling, it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to struggle. And actually, as you're saying, it is such a gift in so many ways. It frees your child from that unnecessary, I think, enormous pressure and anxiety. It helps them be human. It helps them be vulnerable. I haven't even used that word yet, and I'm using that word in every one of my sessions, being vulnerable, if you want to call it authentic, but it lets your child know, or your partner know, because this is also a wonderful, way to get out of these cycles, is just like saying, hey, I think I messed up there. Or I could see the look on your face and you look upset. I'm wondering if there's something, I missed something here. If I just said something, or what's happening for you right now. But overall, just, in terms of the gift, and letting our children know, our partner know, I know I've got some work to do. And, kind of circling back, Drew, to that question about how can we help encourage, support the partner who doesn't have the addiction, also get help and do their work, as you were saying, Michael, Deneen, and like Jason and I, we can definitely see that partner also has a lot of work to do as well. And yet we don't want to just, pass the blame or say, you have more issues, or, or it's equal. It's just, we both, went through this trauma of addiction. We both need help with it.
Right.
And even if it's not, like when I went into Al-Anon, I had grieved my father at that point. Yeah. But I was having some anger toward other people in my life, other people. And I just realized I need some tools, and I don't want to walk around with all this anger.
Yeah.
So the tools were incredibly helpful for me.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So I'm having an issue right now, which is
we're therapists.
This is free therapy. This is free therapy.
I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to minimize. Go, please, Drew.
Well, I was going to be sarcastic. My issue is I'm not even halfway through my list of questions here, because this is so good. Thank you guys for sharing this, and I do. If you've got the time, would like to go into some other areas here around healing and rebuilding trust, and this might end up. I don't want to presume, but we might have to do like a 2 or 3 parter on this couples in recovery, because it's so rich, it's so good. Yeah. But I do want to get to the healing, and how do we begin to rebuild trust, right? So like we could do 10 parts on what we just were talking about, like just those recognizing the addiction, like all that.
Yeah.
But for the couples that you're seeing now who are in it and are saying, okay, we want to recognize that, it's the system, the
Sure.
pattern that's the enemy. It might seem like a really long, daunting road of repair
Right.
and trust building. And it might be, right? I know that I have close friends in my life right now that would say for themselves, like, I don't know that I want to do that work. I don't know that I want to. But for the couples that do, like, how do you encourage them? They're in the beginning stages. How do you begin healing? How do you begin rebuilding trust? And that's probably a whole nother 10-part.
Great question. No, this is great.
Well, I'll try to say a couple things. And going back to accountability, I think for the partner, the using partner, whatever you want to describe it, but if there can be some humbleness, some acknowledgement, right, which is, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This must have been blank for you, horrible. I've seen that, go a long way in sessions. But I think the initial solution to rebuilding trust is, let's think about one of the ways you two ended up in a cycle is generally not communicating, right? Things are tough. I'm just going to have a couple nightcaps, 2 or 3 or 10, right?
Yep.
Instead of rolling up my sleeves and really, address what's going on with me or the relationship. So I think rebuilding trust, here it is. It's simply communication, right? But by that, I mean openness, collaboration. You don't have to share your therapy sessions. We don't want your partner to be a therapist. But the more you can share, the better, because when we know, there's less things we make up, right? When we don't know what's going on, we make up, and it's always the negative, right? I always tell couples, if my wife Jess isn't talking to me, right, I don't think, she must be writing me love letters right now. Right? No, I'm
That's
like,
not the story you write.
Yeah. And I'm like, what did I do? What's going on? Is she okay? Are we, like all that stuff. So I think, the basis is collaboration and communication. I know that's a very simple answer, but I think it's important to keep it simple first.
It's a simple answer, but it's maybe one of the hardest things to actually walk out about. Because even as you were talking about that, I was like, man, why is it so scary for me still to allow myself to be vulnerable with my wife, to allow myself to say, man, I'm really scared. Like I have fear right now about our finances and my ability to provide for our family. I have fear, why? Like it's so, and out of everybody in my life, she's still the one that I have to force myself to say, I'm going to allow myself just to tell you. And, it just happened this morning. I'm doing a talk in a couple weeks, and I really care about my family endorsing. It's their story too. So I want them to endorse if I'm giving a talk, so I sent it to my 2 adult children, but I didn't send it to my wife, and I knew I needed to, and I was going to, in my defense, but I realized this morning, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of her not liking it. I'm afraid of what her response would be. And she mentioned to me very lovingly this morning, I know you're going to be talking. I'd love to know what you're going to be talking about. And I was like, I actually have a full manuscript that I haven't sent you yet because it's scary.
Right, because she matters more than anybody.
She does.
Yeah.
Right?
She does. It's like I could have got done in my past life. I could have got done preaching to a room of thousands of people. And when I come off the stage, there's one person I'm looking out of the corner of my eye on what she thinks. And it's so hard sometimes too for that person to, depending on what's going on behind the scenes, they also have struggled to affirm if they're seeing destructive patterns. I know in our story, it was tough for her to affirm the external projection because she could see the internal.
Yeah.
So she felt like I can't.
Yeah.
So it's just all that to say I'm
totally. Well, and
affirming that it's scary.
Well, I want to affirm you saying like it's scary. I was afraid, right? This is really important, especially for males, right? This is not our default. We can talk about family of origin, we can talk about culture, right? But right there, that's recovery. I'm scared.
Yeah.
Right?
So huge.
But it's so hard for us to do. It's hard for me to do, right?
It's so unnatural for me.
Yeah, totally. But
and
that's
yet
recovery.
you just did it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I feel very safe. Sometimes I forget there are other people listening. I feel very safe talking with you guys. I get free therapy here, but yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
something it's a well, you said the patterns. You have to relearn.
Right. And to put together, so I think that first step of even, obviously you've done such tremendous work, Drew, that you can even touch your fear. You can even admit you have this emotion. And then for you to be even braver and admit what you just did about how I can preach to, I forget how many people you said, but to share this manuscript with my wife because her opinion matters more than anybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's so brave. And it's also, that is like, you can call it kind of a secret ingredient to building trust, to really restructuring your bond as a couple for both of you to be able to share your deepest fears.
Well, that's where that's what we were lacking in our connection and our, we call it our first marriage, the first half of life marriage, because we really lacked in the intimacy of being able to connect around the deeper feelings. You know, for her to say, hey, I'm just the go along, the Enneagram 9, go along to get along. Maybe if this next thing brings him happiness, he'll finally be the thing that, you know, so I'm just going to keep trying to give him what he wants, give him what he wants. And, you know, it never worked. Right. And so it's like, I mean, I think that's part of the work that has to be done, you know, in those situations. And I'm grateful for you saying that. And I feel like there's so much more work to be done, but lacking that connection, right? Lacking that intimacy of, here's how I'm feeling right now. We don't do it as much now. I don't want to pretend that we're doing it a lot, but when we first started in recovery together, we did that, phanos. Are you familiar with the phanos, the check-in, the feelings, the affirmations, the needs, the what was the O? I'm trying to remember. And then sobriety. So we would go through this every night. And it was a tool that would help us because, especially for me, the affirmation part was great because it was like, you know, especially coming out of rehab, you're like, I don't know if I've ever done anything right ever, you know, and then for you to kind of have those moments where like, hey, here's what I'm feeling right now. Here's what's coming up. But those tools exist out there that can help couples kind of, you know, establish these new patterns.
To check in, on a deeper level, and just to have some kind of structure to know, like, what should we talk about? What is a deeper check-in than what so many couples do? You talk about work, your kids, or, you know, logistics, but to talk about your internal world.
Right.
And to know that this is what is going to bring us closer.
Right.
So many couples say they want closeness, you know, but they don't know how to do that, what to talk about, or, and as well as knowing the incredible benefits of turning to your loved one, not waiting for them to open up and be vulnerable first, but that either of you can do that. So if it would be okay, you tell me in terms of time. I'd love to talk about trust a little bit. About what
please.
I've
I
seen
saw you writing feverishly over there. I'm like, I want to know what she's writing on her notepad. Please,
Okay. But also, I'm just like, ooh, like I just want to say, like, when you opened up with your fear, that just like touched my chest, like my heart, you know, I was like, oh, like that was big, you know, and that brings people closer, I think, as well.
I would say just real quick to that. I think. So we went through a full disclosure process that was just scary as hell. I mean, because here's a guy like me who just has never fully allowed himself to be known ever to anybody. Like
a lot of men, wouldn't you say, Jason?
Right.
Yeah.
So here I am going to write this, end up being a 20-page single-space document of anything since I could remember since middle school that I'm going to read to my wife, you know, not knowing how she was going to respond or receive or not knowing what life would look like after this, right? But knowing this has to be done for both of us because if we're going to move forward in connection and intimacy, she's got to know me and I've got to know her and I've got to give her the choice to re-up with this person that she really hasn't known because I haven't allowed myself to be known. I will say after that, so a lot of the guys that are in here are going through similar things, and it is tough. We take lie detector tests. But now on the other side of it, I almost have this like opposite fear of now that there's this open channel of honesty, I'm freaked out if there's ever any slight disconnect because I don't like the way it makes me feel to carry, because I used to carry so many secrets and so much manipulation. So now it's like, even if my schedule changes, it could be something simple. I'm going to this restaurant instead of that restaurant. Sometimes I'll say, hey, just by the way, we're going to this spot and whatever, because I don't want her to think for 1 minute that that there's that disconnect. And I think when you get to that place of freedom, and it's not perfect all the time, but when you get to a place of freedom of this is what it feels like to be known, and then to actually experience love for the first time, because you're like, oh, this person still chooses me. And she read the document or heard the document, and she still says, I'm going to choose to love you.
Wow.
That is such another level that I can't even explain, that I want for everybody on the planet. I want them to know, which is the work that you help us with every day. So talk about trust.
Right. Well, actually, we were just talking about this earlier. That there are 3 stages in EFT work, and that second stage is the sharing your deepest fears. It's really the will you love me if I share all parts of me? If I share the hidden parts that I don't even want to look at, that, I don't like about myself. And if you can have that support from a therapist to help you do that, if you're not able to do it alone, just as a couple, just how unbelievably transformative it is for you. Like you're saying, Drew, that's exactly where the bond can be restructured, from being able to do that. I think where a therapist like Jason or I can help is there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be laid before we would ever, walk a couple into that really sacred space and help them be that brave and open up. And I also want to make sure that the partner can handle, that will be able to respond. It doesn't mean that they're going to we can't control exactly what they're going to say, but that we've been able to check in with the partner throughout the process to make sure that they really do want to hear and see all of you, that they really want to know.
Ready. I'm so glad you said that, because I think it would have been reckless to leave that out. And I would say from my seat and experience, it would be very. You need people guiding you through this process. You're absolutely right. Disclosures that are done on their own can be very hazardous. So we need people like you helping us know, because in mine I had a therapist that was actually helping me craft all the language. And man, we went through so many revisions that it's scary to know what that first. If I would have done the first draft, it would have been in pure intentions. But it would have been harmful. It really would have, without the help of therapists like yourself. So thank you for bringing that up. Don't do that. Plus, give yourself the gift of not doing it alone. Like, why would you want to?
Have backup. Right?
Why would you want to do it alone?
For sure.
Anything else on that? On trust and healing and.
Well, I wanted to. Sorry, were you going to say something, Lana?
It's okay. Go ahead. You can go first.
Well, I just want to talk about because Valiant and men's recovery. I have found part of impediment for men, and this is culturally, also we learned this growing up, is first awareness of feelings, right? I want you to talk about feelings, but, sometimes that's a big task. But first, you got to be aware of your feelings, right? I wanted to ask you, Drew, how did you start to become aware of those things we call feelings?
Well, one tool that was really helpful for me, thanks for asking that, by the way, I was blessed before I was ever in recovery or had any language around addiction to have a therapist in Nashville where I live by the name of Chip Dodd. I mentioned him to you guys earlier. He wrote a book called The Voice of the Heart, and it's all about understanding the language of the heart, and he's developed a system around the 8 core feelings. So if we were ever in a session, he's like, Drew, how do you feel? And I went off, because obviously you can tell I'm verbose, so I went off on whatever. He's like, he would put the 8, he had a laminated thing on the floor. He's like, nope, there's 8. I need you to tell me one of these 8. What he was helping me do was he was helping me develop a language for feelings that I didn't have. Okay, so what is this feeling? I'm actually sad, because with each feeling, there was an impairment and there was a gift. So for like loneliness, for example, I was surrounded by people all the time. I would have never said I feel lonely, never. But as I started doing the work, I realized, man, there was a deep loneliness, and the reason why I was able to recognize it, because the impairment of loneliness was apathy. And I was feeling apathy around a lot of different things in my life, my calling, my, all those different words. So I will say that was probably the first step in just getting some language. Like sadness was a really tough one for me to access. Like I just 7 on the Enneagram. I just suppressed pain and sadness, did not want to feel it, just keep moving forward. And so to be able to look at those 8, loneliness, fear has been a big one for me. Fear I never allowed myself to feel before. It's probably the one that's easiest to access for me now in recovery. Like I feel a lot of fear, a lot, and so anyways, that was helpful. Gladness is on that list too. So I was able to say, hey, I feel glad. I have some gladness. I've got anger. I've got these different things. So that was
very cool.
Yeah. But thanks for asking that question. I still feel like it feels a little more methodical sometimes than free flowing for me, as far as like I have to use the tool because I'm emotional and I'm a feeler. I don't know what the word is, clinical. I don't know it, but it's like I have to get out a sheet of 8 feelings and I have to look at them and I have to examine, like I almost have to get out of myself for a minute.
Yeah.
Because if I just go based on what I feel, I need a framework.
Yeah, great. Well, and I want to share too, expressing feelings in a open and a supporting environment is a way to bring connection, right, for couples. And I just want to highlight a reason why.
Okay.
So very cool. Why do we do this feeling stuff, right? True feelings. I'm a man, right? Go Broncos. Let's dominate.
Feelings of anger come up. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think at the end of the day, we say around here a lot, and I think it's pretty common, but the opposite of addiction is not sobriety.
It's connection.
It's connection. So at the end of the day,
Right.
our why is, well, if we don't stay connected to how we're feeling, we're probably going to end right back up in addiction.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that was the thing that was keeping
Right.
us
Right.
from feeling what we need to feel.
Yeah.
And I've said before in the podcast, I didn't have panic attacks until I got into recovery. Not that that's a shining, advertisement for recovery. But I got to where I was grateful because I was like, oh, I'm alive right now.
Right. And my body's telling me something important.
Yeah.
I'm having a panic attack because there's something really scary and I need some support, comfort, guidance. I need something here. And we're just not meant to be alone. Like that whole myth of, the rugged individual. We're not stronger alone. There are so many things that I've been able to accomplish in life because I had support. I had mentors, peers, or I just text a bunch of my mom friends and they text me back. And I can just do so much more when I'm able to turn to other people. Can I just share a couple more thoughts? Okay, thanks. Just about in building trust again.
Okay.
So one thing that I didn't mention, because when I think about my recovery, I think more about Al-Anon, but this is not uncommon that a lot of children of alcoholics, that we might develop a different kind of addiction. And so for me, it was more around work. That was one of mine. But I just was thinking what helped me rebuild trust with my husband. because there's a period of time I was coming home late. I would, call and say, hey, I'm even thinking before texting, but calling and like, yeah, I'll be home, at whatever time. And I always thought I could just do one more thing. And of course that hurt my husband so much, and that broke trust. So I think the opposite of that, of being so, inconsistent and unpredictable, is I need to be super reliable, just like you were saying, Drew, with your
that's
wife.
good. Yeah.
So I have to set limits. When I structure my schedule, I'm just a lot better with setting boundaries. And when I'm not, or when I slip up, I know to acknowledge it and apologize. And sometimes, we all have blind spots. And so sometimes my husband might need to remind me, but overall, I think I'm so much more aware. And I think the pieces before that, for even being able to behave before you make the behavioral changes, I think is really understanding the impact of your behavior. So there's that saying, like, we focus on the drinking, but we forget to like explore the thirst. We don't.
I've never heard that. I love that. Yeah.
Thanks. So just knowing, like, well, why was I working so much? What was that about? Or why does our loved one turn to, whatever their coping behavior is?
Yeah.
And while I think definitely as a couples therapist, that we don't want to pathologize, we don't want to shame, but we also need our couples to know their impact on one another, the unintentional harm that their behavior, their addictive behavior, could be causing. And sometimes it might not be considered addiction, but it could be anger or criticism, but that has an impact.
Right.
And then the second piece is acknowledging the pain. And I think there's nothing that builds trust more than if you have someone in your office, you have a partner who the therapist encourages them to finally share, this is the impact, this is the pain that I've been through. And if the partner, it's not just about saying these, the perfect words to try to,
Right.
be able to rebuild trust. I think the most powerful thing a partner could do is actually let their partner's pain wash over them and show that emotion back. So I always remember this is a couples workshop, and we had the space and we just went through the exercise. It was my husband and me, and I shared something that we had just not been able to heal from, that we kept coming back to. And he kept saying, well, why can't you get over this? What's the deal here? And I couldn't let it go because I never felt like he got my pain. But in that moment, with that exercise, I mean, he like totally took in my pain, was bawling, just looking at me. And I haven't needed to revisit that topic anymore.
Wow.
Because he totally got it. So I think, being able to let yourself feel what your partner is feeling.
Yes.
Show them that empathy. That's what empathy is. It's not a one sentence. It's not a quick, I said I'm sorry. It's really letting someone else know. Letting, it does take some effort to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. But it goes, so far with your healing and rebuilding trust.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say is, on just a daily basis, there are these moments. This is John Gottman's work on trust, where he says, attunement is the most important skill in building trust. So we're never, nobody can attune all the time, but as much as possible, whether this is with your partner or your child, and they want to share something with you, especially if they look like they're in pain or upset or something, you do want to try to turn to them if you can. But even if it's a happy moment, but the more that, you turn toward them,
Right.
and respond in a way that shows like you're in sync, they matter, that rebuilds trust.
Well, and not trying to not have feeling like you have to fix it, which is a gift that my wife has started giving me, because historically I haven't been a safe place for her to process how she's feeling, her emotions. And when she does, I immediately go into, well, we need to fix it, or that's in the past. Like, she would always kind of half-heartedly say that I didn't have a rear view mirror. Like there was no past for me. It was just like, just keep looking forward, just move fast. But the gift she would give me is like, hey, I need to share something with you, and I don't need you to fix it. And that was actually, and she didn't say it condemningly. It was just like helping me wrap my mind around, just a tune, just
Nice. Nice.
It actually relieved my pressure of like, I don't need to come up with a solution for this. I don't have to fix it. She just needs to feel this and say it. Period. Like, it was great, So, not to switch gears too soon. Is there anything else you guys want to say on that trust building? Because I want to get to one other thing before we wrap, but I think I hear a lot with couples in recovery, and it's the fear around relapse. It's the fear around, hey, I think I want to work through this. I think I want to, but I'm so afraid of being hurt again. You hear the statistics, and it's not always promising. And so for the couple that's listening, or the person that's listening who's like, man, I love this person, I want to do the work, but I'm so afraid that a relapse is in my future. What do you say to that? That's tough, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say first validate it. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course you're scared, right? And to provide space for that, I'll just give a real simple thought. I haven't thought deeply about this, but I think, David, recovery is something that we can feel, we can intuit, right? If we know our partner is on recovery, right? And then that can go a really long way. And so maybe there is a relapse, but if someone started recovery, it's more of a relapse than, a use, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm. I think I would definitely validate. That would be the first
you
thing.
can say
like
I'm full of crap. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
no, I
it's kind of
agree
a
with
weak
that.
answer, Jason.
That's where I would start for sure. Yeah, because as we were just saying, it's the attuning. You hear someone is afraid, and that's only going to help connection if at first you start with validation. I think the other piece that I think is really important is just as a lot of clients, before they leave a treatment program, they have a relapse plan. Yeah. They have, who are they going to call? Where are they going to go? What do they need? They have a lot of tools that they know that will help them get back on track. It's also helping the partner feel like they're a part of it, so they don't feel that sense of helplessness or out of control, that, this really scary thing, this trauma could happen again to both of them. And so the partner needs to know, they need to be, included and informed. What is the plan that you have? Not that they're not that they're critiquing or editing it, like they
right.
let, their partner in recovery, whether it's their counselor or their sponsor, whoever, like help craft that. But it's knowing what it is and also what their role could be. How can they help support their loved one? What would not be supportive? And I think asking the partner too, what I think the loved one, so they don't feel like they're just this passenger, along for this crazy ride again. Like, well, what would help you also feel safe? Because it's all about how can we create safety. We can't have connection if we don't have safety.
True.
So what's going to help you feel safe? The last piece, and I don't have this, I'm not sure how to say this exactly, and this probably differs for everyone, but I think talking about other levels of care or other supports, because to me, a relapse just says, that I think one message is that we need to make your program more robust. We need some other supports. Right. I mean, in some cases, you're just human, and
right.
You just slipped because that you're human. But other times, it's like we really need to talk about other levels of care or other supports for you as well, and that willingness. Not like, I'm willing, it's on paper, but then it's, well, give me one more chance, and always, the person finding an excuse or a reason. And then the last part I'll just say is relapse for both partners. Again, like I really want to emphasize that, even though we haven't talked that much today about, well, what is the program that the other partner works on? I definitely, I had to do my work, and it was incredibly beneficial for me. But just really, knowing that when both people are doing that personal work, and ideally couples work as well, so they can really strengthen their bond and do recovery together too, that, everyone's going to benefit that way.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Y'all, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for doing this and sharing, your work with us and your passion and what you do. It's very helpful. How can we find you? People are wanting to work with you and do couple stuff, and I know we refer out a lot of people that are post-treatment that need to do couples work. What's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, I'll go first. Colorado Relationship Recovery is the name of my counseling agency, and best way to do is go online, coloradorelationshiprecovery.com.
Okay, easy enough.
And I have a super creative name for my business, which is lanaisaacson.com.
Hey, I love it. Hey, in marketing, I'm more clear over cute any day. Like, give me something clear. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
My website and my email and phone number as well are on my website. And please feel free to reach out.
Great. Well, this has been helpful for me. I feel like I need to pay you guys for this therapy. I want to call my wife right now and do some attunement work. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and for the work you do day in, day out. It's work that I believe really matters. And so I'm really grateful. Thanks for sharing today.
Yeah, thank you
so much. It's such a pleasure.